Yes. And when I call your name, please just state your name for the record. Mr. Kelly?
Mark Kelp.
Mr. Covington?
Charles Covington.
Mr. Durr?
Lyle Durham.
Williams on.
Thank you. And then let me just double check one more time. Online.
Sign up sheet. Up there.
The sign-up sheet is right here. Yes, sir. So we have established a quorum. If you don't mind, I'll begin the meeting just with a little introduction. And just so everybody understands why we're here, this is a slightly different meeting and than the one we did last month. And so I'm going to go ahead and read through this just so everybody understands, all of us here as witnesses and all of us up at the dais. But we'd like to welcome you to this meeting of the Greene County Board of Zoning Appeals. Before we begin this meeting, I want to inform everyone that we are being broadcast live. It's on the Greene County website and on Zoom. Our meetings are available for viewing anytime on the county website. So if you want to come back at a later date and see the meeting, you can access that. And this is a public hearing for the Board of Zoning Appeals. Sign-up sheet is located right here to my right. So anybody that would like to speak tonight, please sign up on the sheet so that the chairman can call you. So it's right there on the right. And when you do speak, we ask that you give your name and your address as a matter of public record. And one of the reasons why we're being so formal is because this is a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. It is a quasi-judicial body. That means that these hearings are treated similar to a court of law. So unlike a lot of our public meetings where we have public comment, that public comment is simply opinion. Anybody can come up and they have their time and they can say whatever they want. In this scenario, anybody that is speaking, if you would please keep your comments fact-based and related directly to this case. It is a hearing, and therefore our goal here today is to gather facts. So in that light, we also ask that you refrain from any disruptive behavior, no clapping, no disrupting the proceedings. Please allow everyone their opportunity to speak. We do ask for this type of hearing that no head counts, no involving the audience. So just each speaker present the facts as they know them to be. And again, I use the word facts all over quite a bit. So the purpose of this public hearing is to obtain the facts and comments from both proponents and opponents regarding the subject matter and pertinent to this request. And this meeting is being recorded for the purpose of archiving the minutes. Each speaker is to come to the microphone at the podium, provide his or her name, mailing address, street, city, state, and zip code. Each speaker is encouraged to keep their comments concise, to the point, and is limited to 3 total minutes. After everyone who wishes to speak has been heard, the opportunity for additional comments or rebuttal will be considered as time may allow. And then the purpose of why we're here tonight, this is a Board of Zoning appeal, request for appeal. So the Natural Roots Farm, William and Rebecca Lunsford, are appealing the zoning determination regarding their operation. And they're requesting an appeal of the zoning administrator's determination, which is violation 22-052, that the operation of a campground without a special use permit and tourist lodging offered in a camper is not in compliance with the definition of tourist lodging in Article 22 of the Greene County zoning ordinance. And that is the opening of here. I will state that this is a appeal. So it's a little different than what we did at our last meeting. This is, per the code, as the zoning administrator made a determination, and the appeal or appellant this is their opportunity to present facts as to why, or facts that demonstrate that the determination is incorrect. And so at the end of hearing all of the testimony and facts, it will be up to you to decide whether in fact they presented enough facts to show that the determination has been in error. And so that's what we'll be doing this evening. I will just point out that we do have Ms. Kemp, who is the Assistant County Attorney, here tonight. More than happy to answer legal questions related to this matter. I would like to point out Virginia's a unique state, so she does represent the county. The BZA as a body does not require any legal, there's no legal ramifications to your votes. You act as a body, act in a public meeting, so it's not always typical to have a separate attorney for the BZA in Virginia. So just keep that in mind, and if are there any questions before we start? Go ahead and start with the maps, just give you an idea of what we're talking about. And I did read the appeal, but just so we understand, this is a parcel that's zoned A1 agriculture. It's parcel tax number 35-A-32D3. It's at 1097 Haneytown Road in Standersville, Virginia. And so that is the location that we're showing on the screen here. So at the top, this would be to the north, is Haneytown Road. And this boundary of the property, this edge, basically follows Windmill Road. So it's a private road that serves these properties beside and behind it. And then the property boundary, of course, is shown in red, with a large frontage along Haneytown Road. This is a map of the zoning. It is A1 agriculture. This entire area is A1 agriculture, so the yellow signifies that's the zoning for the district. So the facts. The determination is that the appellant has been operating a campground without a special use permit on the property, identified, as we said, as tax map 35-A-32D3. It is A1 agriculture, and campgrounds in the Greene County zoning ordinance are not a use that is permitted by right. It's only allowed by special use permit in the A1 zoning district. Additionally, the applicant is offering tourist lodging in a recreational vehicle or camper. In our zoning ordinance, tourist lodging is only permitted in a single family dwelling. So a physical structure, not a mobile unit, or an accessory dwelling unit. And it has been determined that the operation of the campground and the utilization of an RV as tourist lodging, as a tourist lodging unit, is a violation of the Greene County zoning ordinance. And in your packet, each of these has an exhibit that's related. So if you refer to your packet, the facts related to each point that we're making up are listed: Exhibit A, Exhibit B, etc. The appellant had previously been sent a notice of violation, and at that point in time, with some discussions, they did discontinue operating the campground, but then began almost immediately, within less than 2 months. Give you a little background and basis for the determination. So through conversations, research and inspections at the tax parcel, beginning July sixth, 2021 through October 17th, 2022. In accordance with the Greene County zoning ordinance, it has been determined that a campground has been operating without the required special use permit. And that, of course, is a violation of Article 4-1-2 and Article 3-1-2.4 of the Greene County zoning ordinance. Additionally, a special use permit is required in the Greene County zoning ordinance before a campground can be operated. Therefore, operating a campground without the special use permit constitutes a violation of the article stated 4-1-2 and 3-1-2.4. And I will say, that we'll talk about it a little bit more, but that we do have an allowance in our zoning ordinance that you may camp outside of a campground, keyword, outside of the campground for less than 30 days in the course of a year. And that was put in place. The board's conversation and discussion about that was for people that visited their property and camped on their property. And the other key phrase is, this is for operations that are camping that is outside of a campground. And we've determined that this is a campground. And so, Article 22 of the Greene County zoning ordinance defines a campground. It also includes a performance standard in that definition. So in Greene County, you must have an area containing 10 acres or more to even apply for a campground. So it's an area containing 10 acres or more in an area developed by the owner to accommodate paying guests for stays or short duration in tents, campers, or motorhomes designed for single families or travel trailers owned by the guests. Campgrounds must comply with regulations for sanitation imposed by the Thomas Jefferson Health Department, which is our health district, and a special use permit shall be obtained in every case. And the Administrative Code of Virginia also defines campgrounds. And campgrounds are tourist camps, travel trailer camps, recreation camps, family campgrounds, camping resorts, camping communities, or other area, place, parcel, or tract of land by whatever name called on which 3 or more campsites are occupied or intended for occupancy, or facilities are established or maintained wholly or in part for the accommodation of camping units for periods of overnight or longer, whether the use of the campsites or facilities is granted gratuitously, by a rental fee, by lease, by conditional sale, or by covenants, restrictions, or easements. There's more to that definition. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It does require a permit issued by the health department to operate a campground. And the permit does require that they meet all local codes. And the reason stated, we'll talk a little bit more about later, but it's health, safety, and welfare related, because the campground has human waste, sewage. When you're providing drinking water to people, you have to make sure it's potable water. Campgrounds and fields involve oftentimes rodents and rodent control. There's oftentimes chemicals related to fertilizers, rodent control, other agriculture aspects. So all of those things are reviewed by the health department. Therefore, that's why they require a permit. In the Greene County zoning ordinance, because of those reasons, we've determined that it is a greater impact than a by right use, and that is why we require the special use permit. So again, the performance standard within our definition means that you have to have 10 acres laid out for a campground before you can even ask. So if you've got 9 acres on your parcel, you can't have a campground. And so it has to be 10 acres or greater, and it requires a special use permit. And there were no records found that the campground complies with the regulations for sanitation imposed by the health department, and a special use permit shall be obtained in every case, which is part of the definition we read. So, inspecting, having conversations, doing research, looking through the online advertisements, found from September 26th, 2022 through October 2022, it has been determined that a tourist lodging activity is also taking place by renting out the on-site camper. That is advertised as having water, showers, electricity, television, and that camper is advertised on Airbnb. Airbnb has collected taxes, tourist lodging taxes from that, and remitted those to the Commissioner of Revenue. The applicant did not remit anything to the tourist and does not have a business license, which is also required for tourist lodging. You may hear about farm activity, and farm activity is taxed in a different way, but this is tourist lodging through Airbnb, and it requires a business license. In Article 22 of the Greene County zoning ordinance, well, first in Article 1625, tourist lodging is a by right use in the agricultural district, and it's where space within a structure is utilized for the purpose of tourist lodging. The definition in Article 22 of the Greene County zoning ordinance, again, the use of the camper does not fit the definition of a structure. So structure is something that's permanently affixed to the ground. Therefore, utilizing a camper for tourist lodging constitutes a violation of Articles 3-1-122, Article 4-1-1, Article 16-25 of the Greene County zoning ordinance. And then for your information, I'll read this, but it is the article, and it applies. This is Article 22 definition of tourist lodging. It is the provision of lodging within a single-family dwelling and or one or more structures that are accessory to the single-family dwelling, with guest rooms determined by right or by special use by a special use permit per Article 16-25, in which guest rooms are occupied for less than 30 consecutive days, and which also may include rooms for dining, for meetings, for use by the tourist lodging guests. Tourist lodging definition would also include other residential lodging uses referred to as bed and breakfast lodging, lodges, country inns, hostels, and lodging houses, as long as the use is in compliance with the applicable regulations under Article 16-25. So under that definition, again, a recreational vehicle is not a single-family dwelling, it is not a structure, and therefore, in our zoning ordinance, it is not allowed to be used for tourist lodging. And there have been no approvals that authorize the use of a tourist lodging unit for that parcel. So the appellant made some arguments to support their appeal, and I'll just run through that. So the Board of Supervisors approved agritourism in 2015. So one of their appeals is that agritourism allows overnight stays, allows pretty much anything that by right. And so when the Board of Supervisors approved agritourism, it was specifically discussed that short-term rental or tourist lodging was not a use, a right allowed under the agricultural events or the agritourism, or even as an accessory use. There's a separate definition and supplemental regulations that were created in 2016 for tourist lodging. We just read through those. So the board intentionally did not include it in our zoning ordinance. The year after it was approved in the state code, they actually tried to change the law for short-term rentals to include agritourism, and that never made it out of committee. So the state also didn't agree at that time that this was part of the law. Greene County zoning ordinance recognizes and differentiates agricultural uses from campgrounds and tourist lodging because of the separate and potentially greater impacts. So these are special use permits in our ordinance because of the fact they have greater impacts than by right uses. And the Board of Supervisors demonstrated that by adopting supplemental regulations regarding campgrounds and regarding tourist lodging. The reason, like we opened up with, is to protect health, safety, and welfare. These things, larger ones can generate more traffic than an average use. Again, water, sewer, chemicals, etc. These are all health and safety things that are defined both in the state code and our code, and concerns when these uses are being considered. These uses are not protected under the right to farm code because the uses are not considered customary and incidental to agriculture. Like a hotel isn't customary to agriculture. Additionally, the uses have been defined by the Administrative Code of Virginia as having impacts on public health, safety, and general welfare. And in the right to farm code, it does say that you shall not have a permit against an activity unless there is a public health, safety, and general welfare concern, which is why campgrounds are separate and regulated through the state code differently than agricultural activities. And the appellant admits that having camping, they refer to it as cowboy camping, which is like a dude ranch or an activity ranch where people, similar to tourist lodging or a campground, will spend the night as part of their activities. And then under the grounds for appeal, number 14, under their grounds for appeal, they do admit that the camper on site is used for overnight stays. And a recreational vehicle, as we've said many times tonight already, is not a structure, and therefore, in our definition, it is not a type of dwelling that we allow for short-term rentals or overnight stays. So in conclusion, the appellant does not provide in their appeal notice any facts evidencing that the use is compliant with the applicable regulations. In fact, all evidence points to the fact that the opposite is true. The Greene County Zone Ordinance does not list the recreational vehicle for the purpose of tourist lodging as a permitted use, neither by right nor by special use permit. So there isn't even an application that we could allow that in the A1 zoning district. The zoning ordinance has not been revised to allow the use by right in the A1 zoning district, and the use was not in existence prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance, so it's not something that could be considered non-conforming and allowed because it existed prior to the zoning ordinance coming into effect. And then the appellant does not provide any facts showing that the use is non-conforming or compliant with the zoning ordinance. Therefore, we feel like the zoning administrator's notice of determination should be upheld. And that is staff's presentation. And we can see, I'm not sure if we have anyone from the appellant here or online, so I can check. Is there anybody in the room?
I'm William Munster,
Okay.
co-owner of Natural Roots Farm. My attorney is on the way. I think he was delayed shortly. I guess is it our turn for a response now? My attorney's online. Can he be heard? He should be called in trying to speak.
We do have a 434-996, is that
I think so.
Mr. Hardy?
Um,
Mr. Hardy, if you're online,
Thank you,
go
Mr.
ahead
Hardy.
and speak. We'll see if we can hear you.
Can you all hear me?
We can?
You can? Okay, great. Yes, I'm here. I'm on the phone line, not on the Zoom video call.
Yes,
So
sir,
y'all
hold
can hear
on.
me pretty clearly?
Hold on, we can hear you great. Hold on for 1 second. The chairman has something. Did I jump the gun?
Yes, if anybody wants to speak online, or we need to swear you in, so if you, please raise your hand to be sworn in. You swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. If so, answer by saying I do.
I do.
That's all we got on the sign up sheet, right?
So we can hear you, Mr. Harding. Mr. Lunsford is here. I guess take it away, for lack of a better way to
Great.
say it.
Okay, great, I'll go ahead and start. I think, with Steph's presentation got some aspects that are right, and that is my client, Natural Roots Farm, who is there represented by the proprietor, Mr. Lunsford, and his wife, Ms. Lunsford, they live there on the property, it's their primary residence, and it's a fully working farm. Now, what we've heard is essentially that any activity that reflects camping is going to be considered camping. That's the precedent that the staff's asking for. And it's a finding that my clients are in violation of special use permit because it's permitted and therefore illegitimate campground is reading way too much into what the actual conduct is taking place. I know that staff says that no evidence has been provided to the contrary, that the activity isn't taking place, but all we've heard is that some folks are staying overnight outside from time to time, that it's being advertised in a particular manner, and that the camper, the vehicle, is from time to time being permitted as a more shelter-esque setting for someone to sleep rather than being outside. But we don't have is the fact that this is not the primary use of the land. It's not the primary use of the advertisements. In fact, the advertisements specifically reference that this is a working farm tour and a working farm experience. And whether someone chooses to stay there or not, they have to pay, they're paying for the event, not for the lodging. The lodging there is no lodging. Whether they choose to stay on the property and fall asleep thereon, that is a secondary aspect of what is the 24-hour immersive farming experience. And my clients are proud of that. This is one of those things that we noted in the appeal, and that is, they're one of the few only that, if someone wants to know what farming actually is, it doesn't happen between the hours of 9 and 5. It's not clean and tidied up, and it's not a petting zoo. It's a working farm, and this is the definition of agritourism, and that is people are going to tour and be immersed in the fully functioning aspect of the farm. Now, just because some folks are staying outside, from time to time, again, it's not every participant, every person who comes to visit the farm, it's not an overnight guest by any means, doesn't render it a campground. And we know that the code has definitions of what a campground is. This property does not have that. And that is, there is no designated space for camping. There is no signage that says, go camp here, this is where you pitch your tent. This is not a situation where you've got over 10 acres of cleared land where it's intentionally trying to act like a campground. And so, the idea that the Right to Farm Act, which is referenced in our appeal, permits all by right uses to be exercised when in furtherance of a contemporary ag use. And in this situation, I don't even think staff is suggesting the farm is being used primarily as a campground. It's an ancillary use insofar it's not even truly a campground, but staff wants to call it that. The overnight aspect is secondary. It's not even tertiary to the primary use. And the primary use is a working farm. The secondary use would be the tourism aspect of such farm. And then the fact that a guest can choose to stay throughout the experience, it's not a primary lodging type of activity. This is not a situation where they are holding themselves out to be an independent place to stay. It is, yes, they are commercially advertising to folks who come through the area looking for this type of event. But just because someone is commercially listing themselves on something like Hip Camp does not make them a camp. It's the same way if I were to put my house on Airbnb, it doesn't make my house an actual bed and breakfast. And that is where I think some of the confusion is coming in. I think I understand why someone would see, like, oh my goodness, they're letting people stay there overnight. Well, what we don't have is any definitive terms either from staff as to when camping starts and stops. So if someone's awake until 8:30 p.m. outside of the field and they're having a campfire, but they have no intention of staying, are they still camping? If they show up early in the morning and the sun isn't up yet and they brought a blanket to lay down until, Mr. Lunsford gets out there and calls them into work, are they camping? We don't have any definitions of that. What we have is more structural and zoning-based definitions for a campground, but we don't believe that camping is truly what's going on here. I'll also note that the type of experiences that they're dealing with as far as agritourism and folks wanting to come visit the working farm, this is about as customary and normal of a use of a farm other than crop raising and livestock. Meaning, other than the primary use of a farm, these types of tours are the number one secondary use. It's not that a farmer's market is the number one use. It's not that hay rides are the number one use. It's the tours. And Virginia Tech has come out with studies to reflect as much. This is not a situation where the farmland is trying to be a campground by any other name, and no farming is taking place, no tours are taking place, no actual legitimate bona fide agritourism or agriculture is taking place. This is the third or fourth use, and it's not its own independent use. And that's the crux of this. Is every single person who comes on that property is paying and to engage in the immersive experience working on the farm. They can't be separated. And I think when the board looks at it that way, we recognize, okay, this isn't your traditional campground situation where this citation would be appropriate. Instead, what we have is a more hospitable farm. And when we view it that way, then it comes down to the health, the sanitation, that the concern for protecting a resident or an occupant of the property. And I think that is where the staff argument is suggesting that this type of use is outside of the right to farm protection because the heightened requirements that it is citing would go to protecting the health and safety of those who are there. I'll let Mr. Lunsford address what is and isn't on the property when it comes to an outhouse or it comes to access to water. But I'm relatively confident, based on our conversations, and I'd like to say, I'll let him address it, those are available, should folks need them. But we don't believe that they have to go through the formal process of having all these things inspected because there's been no evidence that there is any negative sanitation issues on the farm. This is not a scenario where a citation's coming in due to activity because any type of actual threat has been exposed to the water sources, the water supply, the sanitation. There's nothing like that. What we have is folks thinking that because someone is sleeping outside, this must be a campground. That's the crux of the citation. And in reality, there have been no material safety concerns, no material health concerns raised or cited. And it's our position that this isn't camping, and therefore it's not even trying to be a campground. I'll let Mr. Lunsford address what type of day-to-day experiences they do offer, what percentage of folks actually do stay overnight versus those who do come onto the property and engage in the same type of working farm tour. And that way the board can kind of put it into context and understand that neither the use nominally or practically is meant or acting as a campground. And with that, I think that summarizes the position. I think our brief summarizes the position, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them as well.
Yeah, Mr. Harding, hi, I'm Bill Zudd, one of the board members. A month or so ago, shortly after we received your appeal, I raised a question about the notice requirement of state law, without which your client can't claim the protection of agritourism. Can you speak to that question? Is that, has that notice been posted? If so, when?
Yes, sir. I can speak to that and tell you that it is posted on the property. I have pictures that I can forward. But Mr. Lunsford's there to speak to it as well. He is the source of those pictures and the confirmation, so it's better coming straight from the horse's mouth. But yes, those notices are posted. Yes, sir. There's, I think, at least one, if not two.
Okay, you had the floor. That's why I asked you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I can read to you what we post on our farm for as far as liability notices.
I think it would help if we had the photos.
Is there somewhere I can email them to you quickly?
I can probably send it to Mr. Freeman.
Okay.
The format is stipulated in state law, and I'm sure if you had them prepared in accordance with state law, they'd probably comply with it.
Yes. I can add them right now to our email that we're all on.
I guess, Mr. Harding, I got a question for you. I got several.
Yes, sir.
I guess Mark Kelp, just so you know, since you can't see. So one of my questions is, you stated that it's not that the tourism, the overnight stays, as a result of the farming stays. So my question is, why is that? Why do you sign up for that through Airbnb or VVRO and not the same on the webpage like you do for the beekeeping class? Why is it two separate things? And my other, I'll let you answer that one before I ask my next question.
I can answer that one.
Just to clarify, were you saying why is it that it is advertised on Airbnb or VRBO, or that
Correct, sir.
it has a sign up provision that's a little different than on HipCamp?
Correct. Why is it advertised on tourism sites, in this case Airbnb, VVRO, or other ones? That's not where I would expect to sign up for a stay at a farm. You know, the beekeeping class itself,
right.
contacts the farm directly, but for the overnight stay, you're going to this third party, so it seems like there's a disconnect there, right? And I was just asking for, yes,
Well, I I think one of the primary reasons why the hip camp posting may be different, and I hope I'm getting your question here, is
I say,
is
we'll
that-
forget about the HIP cam, because VDRO is the one that paid tourist taxes to the county, so I'd like to be specifically about that one, if that's okay.
okay, sure.
Because we don't pay taxes on stuff
and
that
the
we
question-
don't do, right, that we don't do. We pay the tourism tax. Yeah, I'm just curious.
I had no control over what VBRO and Airbnb remit on payments and what I take
How
no
would business end up
payments.
advertising on that?
I had
That's my
take-
question.
So they advertise on why we advertise on VBRO and Airbnb is Airbnb has spent a lot of money advertising and marketing for people looking for farm stays. And the people that are searching for farms to stay on and learn on, Airbnb has far more reach than our naturalrootsfarm.com website.
So do you
If
use
I had
that same
to-
service to sign up for a beekeeping class?
You can use the same service, you can
From
use our
VBRO.
website, you can use our website to sign up for different things.
But not VDRO just for the overnight stay, right?
The beekeeping class is completely different than, that is a class where you're buying agriculture, you're buying an agricultural commodity in honeybees, and you're buying bee boxes, and you're buying instruction on that different. That is a different thing, I can't, Airbnb wouldn't allow me to advertise and take payment for a beekeeping class online, on their website.
Right, because that's agriculture.
There's multi-forms of agriculture, sir.
Right, that's my question.
Yes,
is-
sir.
Right, it's like, okay, I got one says, the overnight stay is a result of my agriculture activity.
I'm here off the phone.
Yeah, so the overnight stay is a result of my agricultural activity. So why am I signing up for my agriculture activity here, whether it's beekeeping or any other class you have, but then I sign up for the actual accommodation over here? If they're both the same business, that's just what I'm trying to understand.
I think the fair answer there is when folks are looking for something that's overnight, including this type of an experience, they naturally have to go through some type of known platform.
Right,
You don't go-
overnight place, not agricultural place, correct?
Well, no, but in this situation, they're both, in the sense that if I'm gonna go to a farm and I wanna do something where I expect to be there overnight, there's no other website for me to go for other than something like an Airbnb, a hip camp, there's no other platform. I wouldn't think to call every farm and necessarily go through only their website.
Yeah, so for example, let's say I wanted to do horseback riding, overnight camp. I'm following what you're telling me, which I've never signed up for one, but if I wanted to, I'd go through Airbnb or VDRO, I could type in horseback camp and find it.
The platform, Airbnb does have other types of reservations that you can do in that manner where it's not inherently overnight. Such that if you wanted to do like a birthday party and rent out a house.
Right,
you
but is
could
that
do that.
agricultural related?
Well, in this situation, they're only advertising it for agricultural based services insofar as they're not saying, come rent it out for your own private concert, right? You've got a big old farm, a lot of pretty land, we wanna have some cows in the back, we're gonna reserve it for our own private concert, and you can sleep as many people as you want there. That would not be ag use, but that's not how they advertise. They're advertising purely based on the working farm experience itself. And so I think to Ford's question, about would I go to Airbnb to do my beekeeping? Well, no, that's not natural. I mean, it'd be nice if they offered that feature, if they expanded their use in terms and services, but there isn't. Most people aren't going to Airbnb only to sign up for pumpkin patch.
Actually, let me clarify my question better, because I think I did a poor job of stating it. My question is, it seems to be, it's one activity, which is agricultural based, whether it's beekeeping, bird watching, whatever. Why is there two different systems for signing up for it? One through your client, one through your third party vendor. Why is it not all just managed by one person, right? Like, why don't you control your own overnight stay so you don't have to pay the extra tourism tax or anything?
Because I do not have the marketing capability that Airbnb does, marketing farm stays. which you can sign on to Airbnb right now and click a tab and search for farms to stay on. We are listed as a farm stay. It is listed as Natural Roots Farm. On all platforms, we host people on our farm. Milking starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was pulling calves in the middle of the night. I've been up for 365 days, milking cows twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. When we have a cow within the first month of freshening, we milk her 3 times a day. We have been up dealing with storms in the middle of the night, protecting our livestock. We host to people that want to experience a farm. We host to families that want to get their children on a farm and collect eggs and be able to pet a sheep, be able to watch a cow get milked. In the pictures that we just showed there, and we forwarded on, the pictures are of our milking demonstration area and also our sanitation contract is through Allied. We have Porta John service once a week from Allied. We do not offer showers on our property. We only offer Porta Johns through Allied.
And and I know that we've got 2 people presenting at the same time, and we got kind of messed up with the phone situation. But there's a reason why they don't offer all those things, because they don't want people to be seeking this out as an alternative campground, because it's not.
Correct, but it's advertised on a tourism site.
Because of the platform, and that's where I think this whole thing starts, is it's gonna ban people from hitting.
I say, and so,
Let's do
I say,
it.
yeah, I've asked that question and I'll, I can't answer. I was saying, my next question is, if it's a functioning farm, like, you probably don't have a copy of like your 1040 IRS forms to report your farm income or any of that stuff with you by chance? To show that that's more than what you got from camping?
We are listed on, we're listed with the FSA office in Louisa. We're also listed with the USDA as Natural Roots Farm LLC as an operating farm. It has been updated on their map. The parcel of land has been updated to show that Natural Roots Farm does operate on that property.
My
The question is,
like,
As far as
let's
tax
say,
documents, I do
tax
not,
documents, like how you gotta report your agriculture, you know, I got 4 sheep, 3 horses.
I do
you know,
not have
those
my
reports
tax
gotta be-
documents with me that shows, we do not report our taxes and how many sheep that we have. We
Right,
report,
but that's the department required to
I think-
report.
I think
we report our taxes through Natural Roots Farm LLC. And farms in the state and in Greene County are not required to have a business license. We've already gone through this when we received the aid, the pandemic aid, that we were not required to have a business license to operate a farm.
That answers one of the questions that come up, I appreciate it.
Sir.
I think Mr. Kelly, you were trying to distinguish maybe what percentage
Of his
of
income.
his income
Correct.
comes strictly from farming, selling of
If you had to give a percent, what do you think?
Livestock.
Probably more than 70% comes from our milk, our egg production, our meat production. We've raised 3,500 chickens in 2021. We raised chickens, lamb, we raised pork, we raised milk, had dairy cows run a raw milk herd share. We raised duck, we raised honey for bees. We sold lots of honey in the past year. We do our eggs, our duck eggs, everything that we can do. The large majority of our income comes from all from farming and agricultural products and producing.
And I think to the crux of all of this, most of that work is done during hours that most people wouldn't expect someone to be at someone else's property. So when it's overnight, or if it's early in the morning, and there's some water on site, but they're not getting a fresh shower, they're not getting the best lodging in the world, but just because they're there during certain hours doesn't render the farm stay be any less than a working experience. You know, if someone wants to go sleep in the manger because they gotta wake up early to tend to the donkeys, that's their call. They don't have to. And just because it's advertised on a platform by which people happen to be noticing it, doesn't render it a campground, it doesn't render it a hotel. It just renders it appealing to people that are looking for this one unique thing. And there is nothing in the ordinances locally or state that say that just because you're placing your property on any particular platform, you're taxing yourself out of your otherwise rightful uses.
Tourist tax was paid, correct?
Through the sites, I can't speak. to
I
that.
can't
The county
speak to
collected
third
tourist tax.
I
on
do
that
not
property.
collect, I do through VBRO and Airbnb, we do not collect payment. That-
They pay the tourist.
That is done
And you're not gonna
Airbnb,
pay taxes on something. you're not doing.
Airbnb, we claim all of our income. My wife and I have to show.
No, what I mean is like, I'm not paying
What
tax
do you
for
mean?
tourism lodging when my family comes to visit, right?
Right.
I'm not gonna pay an unnecessary
But
tax,
you're,
right?
you're
Right,
not
I mean, they're not
operating-
directly paying one, the third-party services may, but at the end of the day, I don't think they're directly paying a lodging tax, because they're not holding themselves out for they are paying their taxes, but they're not paying a separate independent lodging tax, and I don't even think the staff is citing them for that.
They are, because
Yeah, they
VRBO,
reported.
VRBO charges a fee, or that fee.
Correct, through the service provider itself, the platform, but I'm saying there's no secondary payment that they're withholding on their own.
No payment was made to the Commission
From
of Revenue
V-
on
from
behalf
VBRO.
of Natural Root Farms
From
or tourist lodging.
VBRO,
Correct.
Through VRBO, correct.
through
Correct, just
VBRO.
like my accountant pays my taxes for me, right?
And
Goes-
it's
goes
been
from my
paid through,
checkbook.
our, I guess, our lodging, whatever deal Airbnb and Greene County have, we do not collect payment through those services, nor through HipCamp. Whatever deal the county has, they get paid from that directly from Airbnb and VBRO.
So earlier when you asked, why wouldn't they just do it independently? You know, why not just take off?
Right, why wouldn't you just?
VRBO wouldn't be
if
involved
it's-
in that scenario.
Right, if it's truly overnight stay for your farming experience, that's that's the whole reason why we're here, is like, if it's truly overnight stay for my farming experience, why is a known tourist lodging marketing company involved in it?
Because there's nothing better.
Cause we're,
If there's a better platform to get more people to engage in it, he'll use it. But, I mean, he could go on Craigslist and do the same thing, 55,000
And they
people.
wouldn't be paying tourist lodging, right?
Well, what should he or should he not? The staff would say he
Doesn't
should,
mean-
or, I mean, right, it's hard to say. But if he's not using a third-party platform that's already pulling the tourist and lodging tax, he would have no reason to do so because he's not pulling himself out of this.
I wonder, who goes to Airbnb and VRBO that's not looking for an overnight stay someplace? Whether it's a farm experience.
you can Airbnb, VBR, well, I can't speak to VBRO. We are, to my knowledge, we are no longer on that platform. Airbnb, you can seek things other than overnight stays on there. You can seek farm experiences. People can do to what type of experience they want to do. The type of experience we offer through Airbnb and through HipCamp is for families that want to experience a farm.
I think
And
that's
to
great.
do these things,
think
And
getting
they
people
are
out there to
able to
experience
come and
farming is
immerse
awesome.
themselves in an environment, and we allot them a time to experience, and we host. Why we are doing it on Airbnb and HipCamp is because of their marketing capabilities, and it allows us to get out there and capture the people that want to experience the farm. It is clear on there, it's natural, we've actually had issues with we want to make sure that it's clear that you're experiencing a farm and not some ritzy cabin or campground, because there's dogs barking all night during when cows are in heat, they're mooing. And if somebody's coming there for something other than what it is, we want to make sure that they're very well known to that. And it's clear that it is a farming experience. You're staying, the area that he's showing and saying that we're running and developed for a campground is a pasture. That is my pasture, my back pasture for my cows. Cows frequent that pasture. There are honeybees in that pasture. And it is also grown for grass for the cows and for hay as well. It's been cut for years on hay on that land.
And the
There's
folks
nothing developed for a campground.
The folks that are doing it have been warned about what they're doing as well. That's another big part of it, and that's where the agritourism warnings come into play. And that is, they know they're gonna be sleeping in probably less than ideal setting. That's what they're signing up for. And some
Yeah,
people would
and
say,
I've gone camping, I've had primitive camping, and there's all different levels of camping and expectations of what comes with it. And again, giving the farming experience, I think is great. It's a lost art that we get more people involved. I applaud it. But I think if you took out the tents and the campers and you didn't allow the overnight, then and you can still give the experience, then we could, I think, be in violent agreement over this. But it's just that overnight stay, I mean, it is what it is when you see tents and campers.
Farming just operates.
But and to our point, we've worked through this, trying to get to a point before a citation was given. What hour of the day does that end when it comes to this experience? I mean, I'll tell you, if I can't go overnight to a working farm, I don't know what it's like to work on a farm. Is it,
Well,
can
pretty much
they,
in every campground that's in existence.
Well-
There's a campground. When you have people that spend the night, they sleep in a tent, then it's camping. If someone pulls in a camper and they go inside and they sleep during any point in time, they're camping.
So you go to the campground,
but that's the only thing they're doing there, right?
No, I go to a campground and
I go fishing, so
I go
that
fishing,
is
I go
like
tubing, there's a whole bunch of things I do ancillary to camping, and whether or not you wanna say, I went there to go tubing, I just happened to fall asleep someplace. I think we're mixing words here, but I think pure and simple, again, if you're sleeping in a tent, you're sleeping in a camper, then it's camping. And again, I love the idea of what you do, but why not just request an
is
SUP?
it a
And do
tent
this.
or is it a camper? Do you sleep in a shelter? Because you're sleeping in a shelter doesn't make you camping. Can I could respectfully answer
Even
your
if it is
question.
camping though, that's the thing though, even if it is, that's what we're all coming down to, is are they allowed to engage in this activity? Call it by any name you want, it's not a campground, right? The idea that you go to a place, you've got
In
it,
there, then,
we would argue there's no infrastructure here that would render this a campground.
again, I've been through primitive camping where there's nothing there but my tent. I don't know if anybody's ever been there before, but it was offered up as a camp experience for me.
But
But again, going back to, why not just do an SUP? Make it
Because of
legit.
what it says on that sign right there. And if I do an SUP, it voids my agritourism liability protections and I'd never be able to afford to operate. The only reason people can go pick apples at orchards now is because of what it says on that sign right there. Because when operating in agritourism is any natural activity, it's a whole list of activities. And what people are coming to our farm is to experience activities.
So could you offer those experiences without?
If
the
we
sleeping over?
were to get a special use permit, we void our protections that the state legislature has put forth. And then I will go to one more thing, to quickly answer your question. You said that you go camping all the time. Have you ever been to a campground where you can watch a cow get milked right there?
No.
All right then, sir. That's what you get
I've
at
been
my
camping
farm.
where I caught a
That's
fish.
what you get at my farm. Have you ever?
But you
I
don't
need
get
to
the
be
campground.
You
about
don't
it.
get a campground, there's no campground. There is absolutely no campground.
We
There's,
have some pictures of people pulling campers in there.
There was a
That-
big-
we allow people to stay in whatever, whether they
They
wanna
bring
stay in
that
their
to-
car,
they're bringing
whether
that.
they wanna stay in their tent, whether they wanna stay, however
Right,
they
that's the
wanna
point of
experience their
representation,
things.
So
We
no
allow
tents.
them to seek their shelter
So
because.
what if, let's give it if you did not allow people to stay overnight, would they still come? Would they
Why
still
can't
come?
I allow people to
Well,
stay
I'm just
overnight?
saying, do you think if you said, I'm sorry, you can't sleep here tonight, you can't put a tent, you can't park a trailer, would they still come for the farming experience?
Probably, definitely.
I think so.
They
I
do
think
a
it's a
lot
great
of
experience. I
times.
didn't know about it. I
But
would-
But the
Primary
longer
uses.
they're on the property, the more money our farm makes from engaging in there. The whole concept of this is I can raise eggs and I can sell you a dozen eggs every Saturday morning down at the farmer's market. And I can sell you that for $7 and I can be done with it, sir, and I'll see you next Saturday. Or I can sell you those eggs, I can teach you how I raise those eggs, I can teach you why we're a regenerative-based, pasture-based organic operation. And then I've done so much more than just sell you those eggs.
You got me sold. I want to
Yeah,
participate, but I'm
yeah.
not gonna do it.
Well, and that's the thing is we're just, I hear about the campers, I hear about overnight, I hear about the word tent. So at what point is camping render any place a campground?
That's camping.
That's somebody with the,
Let's finish for a second. So if that's not there, but it's a tent, it's camping. And if there's no tent and he's on a blanket, it's camping. So it's, what we're saying is if we uphold this citation,
I said, isn't camping.
you can't sleep outside anywhere, period, because it's camping.
That was
I
gonna be
mean,
more
by
parking
common
lot.
definition, if you stay at a hotel, it's overnight, it's from a certain time, check in to check out. They do the same thing at campgrounds, you come in at a certain time, you leave at a certain time, and it's usually overnight by common experience. And so I think that's what we're trying to.
That eliminates the attraction there to the farming. That's kind of the crux of the issue. Otherwise, they're just there as a onlooker. I can go to a farm any time during the day, anywhere in Greene County, and get the same experience I would being able to visit his between 9 and 5. I can drive by it right there and say, look at the animals that are out in the pasture. But all the milking, the eggs,
And anybody who has a farm and allows friends to come over and camp out for the night, they're not charging, we're not collecting tourist taxes on it. I think that changes it. You know, when they have a campfire, they have a tent, I mean, it's got all the components of camping.
well, the staff says it doesn't, right? Staff says it doesn't have sanitation, doesn't have potable water, doesn't have 10 cleared acres, doesn't have a primary use as a campground. It's a farm, and they're doing agricultural-based contemporary activity on the farm. And that is, what do you do when you're not farming on the farm? Probably camp. Shepherds used to do it, right? I mean, it's one of those things that being out.
Sleeping in his house.
No, well, I'm just saying, what recreationally, how do you use the farm other than the actual farming activity? If you're staying overnight, that's the only way you can engage in the farming activity. And so, unless the board is gonna say that 12:01 a.m. is when they can show up, and they have to be out by 11:59 p.m., otherwise it's turned into a campground, we're starting to pick at the weeds and
They said that's asking us to write the law, which we're judiciary, not legislative.
Sure, but you're just interpreting and applying what you've got. And what you've got right now has a lot of material differences in a campground. He doesn't wanna be a campground, if you really say, why not, you go get the SOP. He doesn't want to have 10 acres of cleared land for a campground. He doesn't want to do all that, because that's not what he is. He's just a farm. And to Mr. Cummings' question, would people still come if they couldn't stay overnight? And he said, yes, they would. That goes to show what is the primary. Would you go to a campground if you couldn't camp there? No. You might say, well, you can fish. Well, at that point, you're a lake. You're not a campground. Would they still go to his farm if they can't camp? He said yes, and the numbers will say yes if the board needs IRS data or something. The point being is, it's a farm. Everyone who's staying there knows it. They all know what they're buying. They have to buy that. They're not offered any type of lodging. They're not offered most of the components of a traditional campground. And whether they take it or leave it is up to them. When they buy the right to stay overnight, they don't have to. They're not gonna get a refund if they leave, right? That's not, you gotta think from a booking standpoint. They're not.
Yeah, but like you just said, they pay the right to spend the night.
Sure, they did pay for that right, to be able to be a part of the farm throughout the night. In fact, if they show up at 2 in the morning to help out throughout the day, that's no different than if they woke up there in this situation. We do recognize that we can call certain vehicles campers and tents. If you're in a tent at night, people wanna call it camping, but this is a relatively basic agritourism activity